Okay, I really don't know what to say anymore, but I'm just gonna show you a few pictures. You see this, right? Los Angeles fires. It's absolutely crazy. Look at it. Like, they look like pictures from a movie. And it just looks like hell. Now I want you to compare that to this picture. Okay? Wildfire detection. This was May 9th, 2023. I want you to compare that to this picture. Wildfire monitoring. October 29, 2024. For NASA. Now I want you to compare that to this picture. Am I the only one that sees this? Hello? What? What is happening? I haven't done a video on Spire Global in a while, so I thought I'd just do a little touch up on it. And there's a few facts and a few things that I just recently discovered because I overlooked listening to not really a podcast, I don't know what it's called, but I'll just call it a podcast of the management, so Spire's CEO, CFO, on a call talking with, I guess it's a conference call, I don't know what it is, but they're talking about this deal that they had with Kepler in their plans to sell the part of Spire, or most of Spire Maritime, for $241 million. And I thought there was a lot of facts and a lot of things that I overlooked last time that I found were really insightful, because I haven't talked about Spire Global in a while, so I thought I'd talk about it now. So a few things to note. Look at this market cap, right? And right now it's trading at a $340 million market cap. They sold, out of these five, they sold most of this one for $241 million. And they sold most of this one. When I say most, it's because they sold all of Spire Maritime other than the one that's working with the government, with the US government. That's probably for some type of clearance issues, right? So they probably can't sell all of it, and also some type of secrecy issues. They don't want it, like the US government doesn't want them to disseminate more information to other companies. The fewer people that know, the easier it is to keep a secret. So they sold, we'll just say they sold all of Spire Maritime minus Spire. We'll say Spire Maritime US is part of Spire government, so we'll just say this is all Spire Maritime. This they sold for $241 million. Note that there are more than two things here, right? Now, yes, it's true that just because they sold this for $241 million doesn't mean that these are all going to be worth $241 million each, right? That's a given. Yes, I understand. But they sold this for $241 million, which they... Oh, excuse me. What happened? Whoops. Which they announced in their conference call and inside the press release that they gave. Spire Maritime, they sold that, they got to that price, which is, they said 5.8 times the trailing 12-month revenue is what I'm pretty sure is what I wrote. 5.8 times trailing 12-month maritime revenue, yes. So that means this Spire Maritime made about $40 million, a little bit more than that, about $40 million in revenue in the past 12 months. Now, another thing to note is I'm actually referring to this stuff, right? So, am I referring? No, I'm referring to this one. Yeah, $241 million to Kepler. And I think they wrote that over, I guess they didn't write it here. Inside the conference call, they did say that it was 5.8 times trailing 12-month revenue for Spire Maritime. So that's a number that we can keep in mind, right? So this alone made $40 million in the past 12 months. In the third quarter, they also noted that they had achieved a record $40 million revenue. Now, I'm going to just assume some of these numbers are just numbers I'm pulling out of my ass, right? So right now, I'm just saying, okay, if you made a record of $40 million in this last quarter, then maybe you made on average, we'll say half. You made about half of that amount of revenue per quarter. So in that case, then we'll say on average you made $20 million a quarter, which equates to $80 million annually. So keep that in mind, right? About $80 million in revenue. Now, after this deal goes through and they sell off all Spire Maritime, that they would have about $110 million of cash on hand. No more interest payments, no more anything, right? They don't owe anything anymore after selling Spire Maritime. So they'll have about $100 million of cash on hand. So if they have $100 million of cash on hand, that means that this company, right, because they have $100 million of cash on hand, so the rest of the company, minus the cash that they just have sitting in the bank, is right now valued at $238 million. So we'll say about $240 million is how much people are evaluating the rest of Spire Global to be. Earlier, I guesstimated about, we'll say, $80 million of annual revenue. So that means that they're trading at about a 3 times yearly sales. That is, in my opinion, pretty low. That is pretty low. The other thing that I want to really note is that the reason why I brought this up, this was published November 4th, and this was basically, why am I clicking so many things? Spire Global, they wanted to have a small update, even though they couldn't release the books. They started the quarter with $45.8 million and ended with 36.6. So that is a net drop of about $9.2 million. The other thing, they made $10 million of payments toward this principal balance, right? Not interest, so principal balance with Blue Torch. That means that they made somewhere they made $800K in revenue above what they paid in interest. So that kind of signals to me that Spire Global by the third quarter was already cash flow positive, and they were able to sell or they were able to pay off some of the principal of their loan, right? Because there's this net difference of $9.2 million from their cash on hand with this difference in $10 million that they used to pay the outstanding principal balance. So from what I'm gathering is they were $800K plus, which is why I'm assuming that they were in this quarter cash flow positive by about $800K. Now the next thing, now there's another thing I really want you to listen to this conference call. I'll leave it in the description below, but there's so much information. But they also said that in being able to finish paying off, like just eliminating all this debt, they were able to eliminate $60 million of payments, of annual payments. $60 million of annual payments, right? So that means that every quarter they're paying $15 million. If that's the case, then that means that if they no longer have to pay Blue Torch Finance, that means that of the third quarter of 2024, if they no longer have to pay that $15 million, then they would actually be up, right? So this is a net difference of $9.2 million. So without this debt payment of about $15 million of quarterly payments, they'd be up, instead of being down $9.2 million, they'd be up about $5.8 million, right? That's cash flow positive $5.8 million, right? That's what is it called? That's net profits, right? Is what I'm gathering from this conference call. So I just think that that's absolutely crazy. If they're making, so that means that if your company earnings, wait, am I calculating this correctly? So if your company earnings is now about $6 million per quarter, that means your company earnings are now 6 times 4, so 24, we'll say $25 million. That means that your earnings per share or your PE ratio, if you're earning about $6 million per quarter, and then you have 4 quarters per year, so you're earning about, we'll say 25, just for easy math, $25 million per year. Divide that by, so right now it's being valued at $340 million. 340 divided by 25, so it's trading at about a 13 price to earnings, so PE ratio, which I think is really good because they also have to account for growth. But aside from all those numbers and things, right, like the numbers themselves, even though we don't have the actual numbers, I'm kind of guessing a lot, but it does seem, I am really bullish just based off of the statements that they're giving, and this sounds like management is equally bullish. Obviously, you can't trust management as much as you can trust a chef with his own cooking, right? But like based on those numbers of because they had to have the numbers out, specific numbers out when they were actually making, when they were making the deal, right? When that deal was signed and everything. So they had to have some type of numbers. So based off of those numbers, I am kind of bullish. But I think a lot of information also comes from what the other analysts said in the conference call. So one of the questions that were asked was basically, it was a really good question, because what he asked was, if you sell Spire Maritime, and we're assuming that Spire Maritime is a really high EBIT segment of the company, then would that ruin the rest of the entire company's overall EBITDA, right? Because if you're selling a high earner, right, it's something that's above the average of everything else, then that will lower your average, because that high average earner, or that earner that is above the average, is no longer pulling its weight, right? And then what Peter Platzer said was that the thing about their business is that they're all equally, like, they all have similar margins. And he said that most, like, all parts of the company are really high margin, and that they're basically proportional. So even if you remove that Spire Maritime, the rest of the overall EBIT would more or less be the same, which I thought was really good. But there's another thing that he noted that I thought was really interesting, was that he said that out of these 5 arms of the business, he said that maritime, weather and climate, and space are all about equally big, and they're all like their biggest part. He said that aviation has a high growth rate, and that Spire, climate change, and security are accelerating in growth, which I think are also really interesting. So I think Spire, by security, I think he means Spire government, because, I mean, oh yeah, it's defense, so it has to be that. This is also defense too, so I'm not actually too sure which part of it is Spire defense, but he said that climate change and security are accelerating in growth, which I think are also really bullish, and showing you that we should be evaluating Spire Global as a growth company, which, I mean, I hope you were evaluating them as a growth company, because, I mean, hello. Another question that someone asked was that if you're selling Spire Maritime, what does that mean about your cost basis, and how will that affect, like, what things do you have to sell off to Kepler? Like, what type of things? Like, what is the overall, like, how are you partitioning the your resources, and like, what are you selling to Kepler? What are you keeping? And this was also made me very, very bullish, because it really illustrates how strong Spire is as a company, and how high the margins can be, because he basically says that we're only selling the software part, right? We're selling the software defined part of Maritime to Kepler, whereas they're keeping all the rest of the infrastructure. Now, this could be bearish, because you could say that, well, because there's no insurance on these satellites, then if crap hits the fan, then you're screwed, because you're holding all this infrastructure, right? But, I mean, they still have the patents, they still have the IP, so I think that's also a really, like, expensive part of, a really big part of Spire Global's, what do you call it? Like, of their valuation. But, in my mind, they were kind of confused, but in my mind, I kind of equate it to Spire Global is basically saying, okay, it's like an iPhone, right? Or like some type of smartphone. They're only selling you an app on the smartphone, but then they have everything else, right? That app can only run on a smartphone, because the smartphone has the underlying infrastructure and everything, right? It's just, they're selling you that app along with the customers that app has done deals and contracts with, right? So like, they're selling the customers, they're selling the customers and the app on that smartphone, which is actually their satellites, right? And their lemur satellites. I think this is also really good, because this means that Spire Global, if they're not using those resources for Maritime, because they're giving that software arm to, or those software defined things to Kepler, they can also repurpose the tools that were used for Maritime for other arms of their business, right? For other things. Maybe in the future they can use those things that were once primarily only used for Spire Maritime for other ventures and other growth opportunities. One thing to note is that Peter Platzer also said that they want to invest in opportunities that will require a lot of short-term capital and that will lead to short-term gains. I guess to simplify it, is they're looking for like the low-hanging fruit, right? That requires a short burst of capital, but has a lot of potential and a lot of potential benefits, or a lot of potential future revenue. Another really important thing that was on the conference call was that they noted that this was not a solicited offer, right? This was an unsolicited offer. Someone just wanted to buy Spire Maritime, and then it wasn't necessarily Kepler, it was some company, and then they started a bidding war with other companies, and there's at least two, so I mean, hopefully there's at least two. So they started a bidding war, and then it got up to $241 million for Spire Maritime. So this also shows that, in my opinion, it's more bullish, because it means that Spire Maritime wasn't necessarily like struggling and in need of cash, and that this was just kind of a chance opportunity that Spire Global took in order to erase the debt. Last thing is that the deadline to file to redo their books is February 19th, 2025. So that's coming up. That's within like a month and 9 days. So definitely keep that on your calendar. If anything happens, it should be within that time, and pray to God that it does not get extended, because otherwise my portfolio is going to look like a pooey. But but yeah, so that's basically the majority of what I can see, all the notes I took on the conference call. Again, I'll leave the conference call link down there in the comments, or maybe in the description. If they ask for your name, your company, and an email, you can just put like A, B, C at D, and then F. It really doesn't matter. I don't know why they ask, because they don't even check, but that's what I do, because I don't know. But yeah, that's all that I can see from this. I hope you gathered something. Maybe after you listen to the conference call, please let me know your thoughts, and please let me know if I'm doing anything wrong or if I'm calculating anything wrong. I just feel that it's just making me more and more bullish, and just seeing, obviously this isn't a good thing, right? This isn't like the world would be a much better place without this giant fire happening in Los Angeles. It really does show you that Spire Global is in like the perfect place to really capitalize on changing weather patterns, changing global security, all this stuff that's like really like, climate change is a thing, right? And Spire Global being there to monitor and being there to hopefully mitigate these problems is a really big thing, right? We also saw the hurricanes and the tsunami warnings a few weeks and a few months ago. That's also really important, right? That's something that Spire Global could also capitalize on. So I mean, like, natural disasters are never good, but I mean, if you're investing in a company that's there to monitor natural disasters and hopefully mitigate them, then I guess that's kind of, it's still not good, but I mean, like, hey, I mean, like, if they can somehow help and then also make a profit while doing so, I'm all for it. So that's my thoughts on Spire Global. I mean, if you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. I'm just rambling at this point, but yeah, peace.